Hello and welcome. This is the second installment in my Decluttering Challenges series. The first video I made in this series was on how to get started with decluttering in the first place, and I will link that down below in the description if you want to check it out. But today I want to talk about another decluttering challenge that many of us face. It's one of the most common, and that is decluttering sentimental items. Things really are just things, but we humans are incredibly good at bestowing value and emotional attachment on our possessions, and that can make them really difficult to get rid of. So today I want to share my top tips for decluttering sentimental items. My first tip is to think about how sentimental items fit into your goals. So before you even start tackling your sentimental items, take a moment to think about the goals that you've set for your home and what you want that space to look like. Then with that vision in your mind's eye, ask yourself, how do sentimental items fit into that goal? Where and how do sentimental items live amongst your other possessions? Do you see family photos all over your walls and souvenirs of your travels on your shelves? Or is that vision devoid of sentimental items? I think this exercise can be really important because it gives us a sense of how much we want or don't want sentimental items to be a part of our everyday lives. Now, if sentimental items are really important to you, feel free to display them, but make sure that that is accommodated in your overall vision. If, on the other hand, you have a vision that doesn't include sentimental items on display, but you can't quite bring yourself to get rid of all of them, think about storage options where you can tuck away sentimental items but still easily access them to bring them out from time to time, such as keeping them in a decorative box on a shelf in your living room. Something like that can also be really good because it gives you sort of parameters, a defined limit for how many sentimental items you can keep, which would be however many fit into that box. And finally, if your goal is to have no sentimental items, you know what you have to do. My next tip is something that I mentioned to you guys in comments here and on Instagram all the time, and it is to get rid of sentimental duplicates. So if you have a lot of sentimental items, chances are many of them are what I call sentimental duplicates. So if you have a lot of items that remind you of the same memory, gather them all up and keep the one that most strongly represents that memory and get rid of the rest. A while ago, I had a lot of items that reminded me of a particularly good time in my life, but I realized that I had a bunch of items that represented the same memory and the same point in time. And so I gathered them all together and tried to figure out which one best represented that time. And what I determined was that the item that best represented that time for me was actually a fragrance. And realizing that made it a lot easier to get rid of all of the other items. And today, I don't even own that fragrance, but it's a fairly popular fragrance. So anytime I go into a store, I can spray it on myself and I am immediately taken back to that time. So if you too have sentimental duplicates, gather them together and keep the one that most strongly represents that particular memory. My third suggestion is to get rid of items kept for negative reasons. Sometimes we call items or label items as sentimental when we're actually keeping them for bad reasons. And the most common in my experience is guilt. Maybe a friend gave us something, or a family member saved something on our behalf, or something was left to us by a deceased relative, and we don't actually want or need or like the thing, but we feel guilty for wanting to get rid of it because it was given to us. And I find these to be psychologically no-win situations. We feel guilty for keeping the thing because we don't actually want it, and guilty for wanting to get rid of it because it was given to us. And in either scenario, the only feeling that that item is giving to us is negative. There's nothing positive coming from that item. And I think realizing that and understanding that we're keeping the items for negative reasons can make it a lot easier to let those things go. The fourth tip I want to share is to be selective about heirlooms. Heirlooms are weird because they're not necessarily sentimental to us, the current generation that owns them. And they may not have even been sentimental to the original generation that owned them, but because they've managed to stick around for so long, they become really difficult to get rid of. And a lot of this boils down to a concept called escalation of commitment, meaning the longer an item has been around or the more time we put into something, the harder it is to let it go. Now, if you have heirlooms that you enjoy having and you don't want to get rid of, then keep what makes you happy. But if you have heirlooms that feel like a burden to you, chances are future generations will also feel burdened by those items. So break the cycle and get rid of them. If you have family heirlooms that you want to part with, I recommend reaching out to other family members first and asking them if they want any of those items. Now, I know that a lot of actual minimalism experts don't recommend pawning items off on family, and normally I don't either, but I think heirlooms are sort of a special case. Your family may consider you to be the caretaker of particular heirlooms, but not the actual owner. The family overall may be the actual owner of those heirlooms. So if you have heirlooms that you want to get rid of, make sure that you ask other family if they want those items first. And make sure that they know that you are going to get rid of anything they don't take. So they can't come back a few years down the road and be like, where is grandma's quilt? Why don't you have grandma's quilt? Make sure they know. And if your family also doesn't want those heirlooms, try to find other homes for them. Depending on what you have, those items may be valuable to local museums or antique shops. My fifth and final tip is to actually deal with photo collections. Photos can seem small and innocuous, but they can really pile up over time. But the good news is that dealing with them is a lot easier than it seems. You just have to get the ball rolling. Now, I'm actually right in the middle of dealing with my own photo collection. It's something I've put off for a long time, but now that I've actually started dealing with it, it's a lot less cumbersome than it seemed initially. So what I've done so far is gather up all of my physical photos, and then I divided those into piles chronologically. Then I went through each pile and pulled out photos that were duplicates or blurry or just generally photos that I didn't want. And then I scanned each of those piles into my computer and organized them according to their chronological pile. And now what I'm doing is going back through each of those piles of physical photos that I have. I'm selecting only the best of the best, and I'm going to put those into photo albums. Now, you don't have to do what I'm doing. You can go purely digital or only keep physical photos. Whatever you want to do is fine. Just make sure you set aside time to actually deal with them. All right, those are my top 5 tips and strategies for dealing with sentimental items. Now, of course, this is not an exhaustive list of the different techniques that you could use to declutter your sentimental items, but these are the things that I like to keep in mind and the things that I've found to be really effective. So I hope they can be effective for you as well. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.